Hello and welcome back to our study of Peninei Halacha, the teachings of Rabbi Eliezer Melamed, Shlita. Here we are, Sof Shavua, Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Shalach, a parsha in which we should all be thinking of Eretz Yisrael and the beauty of Eretz Yisrael. Please continue davening for Chalei Tzvagan Yisrael, Refuah Shalem L'chol Petzuei Yisrael, safe return of all of our hostages, and reminder that our learning is dedicated Le'ilu Nishmas, Seren Daniel Shimon, Ben Harav Daron V'Sheli Hashem Yakum Damo. The next chapter is Kohein, Rasha. HaMitzvah Lases Kapayim Chola Al Kol HaKohanim. So the mitzvah to duchen, it falls upon every Kohein, Ben Tzaddik and Ben Rishaim, whether they are righteous or not. Lefichach Gam Kohen Shechote B'Achilas Machal Masurim or B'Gili Arois V'Shar Averos. So therefore, a Kohen who sins, he eats non-kosher food, he has inappropriate relationships, other Averos, we're going to see some exceptions to this. So in any event, Chayiv La'alos Duchen is still required to go up and duchen. And if he refuses to go and duchen, to go up to duchen and bless the people, then aside from being a sinner, he's also adding this because he's not fulfilling the mitzvah of duchening. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Tefillah in the 15th chapter, the 6th Halacha, Shein Omrim La'adam Rasha Hosef Od Rasha V'Himanim En Mitzvos. We don't say to a person who's a Rasha, add more wickedness to your already sinning behavior and refrain from mitzvahs. So don't worry. Don't be in wonder about how is it possible that a sinning Kohen, a Rasha, can bless the Jewish people. Because it's not the Kohen who's blessing. As we've mentioned a number of times, the Kohen is the conduit. It is Hashem who is blessing the Jewish people with love. And in order for this blessing to be revealed in the world, so the Kohanim were commanded to express it, again, through their blessing. And in since, generally speaking, Kohanim are the group who have the holiest categorization and workforce, more than the rest of the plebes, so to speak. So therefore, they were chosen to express this godly blessing. But the blessing does not depend on the independent or individual righteousness of the Kohen who is blessing. But rather, it's in the ratzon and the will of Hashem who wants to bless the Jewish people. Aval. But let's say the Kohen does Kohen-related averos. Let's say the Kohen married someone he's not supposed to marry, as we learn in Parshas Emor, those prohibitions. Or let's say he is not careful about coming close to dead bodies. Then he cannot duchen. And the reason is, because these prohibitions were enacted to safeguard the sanctity of the Kohanim. Therefore, one who violates those transgressions is creating a pegam, he's creating a deficiency in his kahuna. Therefore, Chazal have punished him in a way that he cannot go and bless the Jewish people. Similarly, we don't call up such a Kohen for the first aliyah to the Torah. And let's say a Kohen who does violate some of these rules, and then he is a chozer b'tshuva, he repents. First he has to divorce his wife. And he has to make a vow that he will not further marry anyone he's not allowed to marry. And afterwards, he can then duchen. And if he is normally, let's say, working in the cemetery or going around the cemetery, he has to accept upon himself that he will no longer do this. He will no longer go into the cemetery and be tamei l'meis. If a Kohen who worships avodah zarah is also disqualified from duchening. Gemara Menachos tells us that a Kohen who is worshiping and working in the Beis HaMikdash, rather, he is not allowed to perform the avodah if he worshipped avodah zara. So too with Birchat Kohanim. And similarly, if he returns and he does tshuva and he accepts upon himself to no longer worship avodah zara, then he can duchen again. Yeshnam poskim shemash mesdinu shemachal Shabbos farhesia hainu b'fnei asar Yehudim l'din oved avodah zara. There are some poskim, he says, that compare one who is a Shabbos violator in public, when everybody knows that he violates Shabbos, meaning in front of 10 Jews, meaning so that you, me, and the lamppost, we all know. And they compare this to a Kohen, or let's say anyone, who worships avodah zara, she'aslo alos l'duchen, which in our case for the Kohen would preclude him from duchening. V'chein pasuk bala Mishnah Berurah, and this is how the Mishnah Berurah passes: Aval ladas kama migdolei hacharonim mikama tamim gam Kohen shemachal Shabbos yochol la'alos l'duchen. But according to many acharonim, and for a number of reasons, even a Kohen who is mechalal Shabbos is allowed to duchen. Rashis, why? First of all, it's not clear. There's no clear comparison that one who is mechalal Shabbos is considered an oved avodah zara. That's one. Shainis, the second reason, people who are mechalal Shabbos today, it's not the same as it was in previous years. But avar, kol mi shechila Shabbos farhesia, hiftem bekaf orif lihudas toch hasrasa keneged atar v'mitzvos. In previous generations, when everybody lived in the shtetl, let's say, and someone is mechalal Shabbos, he has completely removed the yoke of Judaism from him, and he has cast off Torah and mitzvos. Ulam kayom, but today that's not the case. Mechalei haShabbos einim miskavdim l'hachis. People who don't keep Shabbos, they're not doing so as a rejection of Judaism. They're not trying to anger or be angry with God. And even if they do so in a very well-known way, that everybody knows, they're doing because either they lack emunah or they lack education, they don't have the background. And therefore a Kohen who is mechalal Shabbos, who's not trying to violate and embarrass the name of Hashem, and he's not trying to make a statement against the Torah, and according to the lenient opinions, certainly he can duchen on the times that Kohanim, certainly for us on Yontif, that when the Kohanim duchen. Aval Kohen shemachala Shabbos lahachis, but a Kohen who violates Shabbos, again because he's against the principle, he's what we call a mumar lahachis. He's just angry. He wants to make a point. So Rav Malamed is speaking in Israel. Let's say they have all these protests about whether the buses should run on Shabbos or not in certain cities, whether the theater should be open on Shabbos in certain cities. So if he's involved in those groups that protest and say dafka they should be open, as long as he has not returned and done tshuva, and there certainly would be disqualified from duchening in those cases. But I think that such an important note that we have to find out, because when we read Sifrei Halacha, it's very easy for people to say, no, it's usher. Mishnah Berurah says it's usher, and that's it. There's no room for any discussion about this. But I love the nuance that Rav Malamed brings to this, that we have to understand that when people are mechalal Shabbos today, it's choser emunah, choser limud, that it's because they lack education or they lack emunah. The fact is that they want to come to shul and they want to duchen. It's not that they're trying to make a statement. The fact of how they get to shul, etc., so that's a different story. And obviously it's not ideal. But we shouldn't necessarily disqualify people right off the bat. And I guess you would make the same argument. People always have this discussion, whether people are mechalei Shabbos, can they daven for the Amud, can they get an aliyah in shul? And you'd be surprised, particularly here in America, that there are many, many shuls that would not allow it. In some shuls, if you wouldn't allow it, then nobody would ever get an aliyah. But that's a whole other story. I'm just thinking that it's important for us to have this conversation about nuance and understanding and realizing that, as my Rebbe, Rabbi Wein, always would say, there are not so many of us to go around that we can afford to just be casting people away. Obviously, we have a fealty to Halacha, but we also have to have an understanding of how Halacha works, and this will help guide us forward, hopefully, in a more reasonable fashion. So that's my own little take on this, I think it's something very important to point out. I don't usually deviate from the script, but I think here this is extremely important. So thank you so much for listening. Wish everybody a peaceful and restful Shabbos. Please continue davening Chalei Tzvah Yisrael, Refuah Shalom B'chol Petzui Yisrael, safe return of our hostages. Please continue learning Leili Nishmas, Saren Daniel Sheva Ben Harav Doron V'Sheli Hashem Yikum Damo. See you here next week. Have a wonderful Shabbos.